Mr. Francis Baird, Distinguished Fellow, Energy Policy Research Foundation. Thank you.
I would happily vote for us to come back every year because it's so wonderful and the hospitality is so great, but also because it's only 14 kilometers between Spain and Africa. And as an African-born South African, now a US citizen, these issues between Europe and Africa and the West and Africa really exercise my mind. Let me explain why. Look around you. Just take a look around and tell me if you see anything in this room that did not start as either mining or energy. Nothing here is possible without energy. It's mining and farming, everything, the wood, everything, the steel, it starts with mining and farming, and the correlation between the two is energy. But when you travel through Africa, in the poorest parts of Africa, it's been referred to artisanal mining, children mining, peasant farming. Farming at scale leads to prosperity. But in Africa, you find that energy is at the heart of all its poverty. And this is what we have to change. It's not a new thought. For the last 20 years, the world has spent about $100 billion to power Africa on renewable energy. Today, 600 million Africans don't have any energy access. So when the blackout happened here in Spain and in Portugal, Europeans were aghast. It was a nightmare. For Africans, most of them, it was just Monday. They don't have any energy. I recently saw a calculation that says the average African, if you exclude South Africa, the average African has only enough electricity to power a fridge for 6.5 hours a day. Now, think to your own life. Can you live a modern life with only 6.5 hours worth of electricity for one fridge? Nothing more. So, if we look at the issue here, it is the intersection between energy, state fragility, underdevelopment, hunger, poor health. It all comes together. And it comes together because the world is not allowing Africa to power itself to prosperity. If you look at energy access in Africa, the bottom tier of energy access is South Sudan, Chad, Burundi, Malawi, and Central African Republic. The lowest energy access is South Sudan. 7% of people have access to energy. Now, why is this so? It's not only because these countries are unable to do it themselves. It is because they prevented from using what they have in the ground to power themselves to prosperity. We'll talk about that, but it's vital for us to understand that this push of renewable energy not only prevented Africans from developing modern economies, it also burdened them with huge amounts of debt. And as a result, electricity prices in Africa, and Diana referred to the US, but in Africa, they're the highest in the world in many cases, and it's mainly due to costs associated with renewable energy. Because the grids are unable to take on the energy, and by the way, African energy grids, electricity grids, have to be expanded enormously So if you look at fragility, according to the Fragile States Index of the Fund for Peace, the most fragile states in Africa closely mirror the list of those suffering from energy poverty. I mean, this is no coincidence. It's just a fact. And yet, people bemoan the fact of state fragility, but they don't look at the root cause. And we have to start looking at the root cause, for instance, unemployment, industrialization deficits. No modern economy in the West has been built on renewables because it's intermittent power, and therefore you don't have baseload, and therefore you can't have factories and mines and so on running on renewable energy. If you want to mine in the Congo and make it reliable, you need baseload. And baseload comes from all the resources that the West take for granted and is now trying to ban. If we look at economic fragility, according to the WHO and global hunger, there's a direct correlation between hunger and energy access. So how can we say that we don't have to stop this vicious cycle by allowing Africa to turn it around? Of course, energy poverty worsens economic stagnation. So explain to me, how do you decarbonize a continent that is never carbonized? It doesn't make sense. And when you look at economic stagnation, it makes fragility, state fragility, worse. And if Spain worries about, and Southern Europe, if you worry about people from Africa coming across looking for a better life, with all the concomitant problems of child abduction and so on, well, let the Africans develop their own energy resources to supply electricity to their own people so that they can move ahead and have agriculture that wipes out hunger, that they can make the most of their mineral resources because they have energy. It is the foundation, energy is the foundation on which all development and peace relies. It's built on the foundation of energy. So, if we look at what must be done, it's no longer enough to say, let the Africans have renewables, and the rest of us will have more coal-fired power products than ever before. Because Diana explained where these solar products are made. It's made in China, who are building more coal-fired power stations than anyone else. So if you're going to look at the China effect, and you worry about the Belt and Road effect, and you want Africa to prosper, you can't put restrictions on Africa, on the entire continent of the fastest growing human population in the world, that you're not prepared to put on China or India. Frankly, I think it's very simple. I really believe so. Allow African countries to invest in the cheapest energy sources available that they have in their ground. And if it's gas, it's gas. But they need electricity and they need the investment to make it possible, and that should be developed by the private sector. Why do I say that? Well, the state has tried to do it. Governments around the world have tried to do government-to-government programs, have funded enormous investment, and it hasn't worked. Let the private sector in, make it possible for them to fund electricity in Africa. If you don't want the rest of the world to stop worrying about net zero, then at least give Africa a carve-out. At least make it possible for Africa to say, we're not going to be punished if we develop our own resources, so that our people can be fed, our factories can provide work, and all of us can prosper. You can't have peace building without energy infrastructure. And go and look at all the conflicts in Africa. The Wall Street Journal recently had an article about the growing wars in Africa. Do you think there's no link between that and the poor energy access that its people have? It's possible and it's necessary to have Africa prosper as long as we don't prescribe and contain it to the government sector. I hope you'll support me in this effort, and I hope we can come to a place where the 14 kilometers between Spain and Africa is a route for African tourists, not migrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Francois, Diana, this was great.